It's been moved. 1379 now be closed.
Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
That was pretty good.
Gotta keep it light.
Motion that ordinance number 1379 be passed on second and final reading and advertised according to law.
I second that.
Been moved and seconded that ordinance number 1379 be passed on second and final reading and advertised according to law.
Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next, we have ordinance 1380 regarding taxi cabs/jitneys.
Motion that ordinance number 1380 be placed on second reading and final passage by title only.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded that ordinance number 1380 be placed on second and final reading by title only.
Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Ordinance 1380 reads as follows. An ordinance of the Borough of Wildwood Crest amending and supplementing Chapter 73, taxi cabs, regarding the licensing and regulation of jitneys in the Borough of Wildwood Crest.
Motion that a public hearing now be held on ordinance number 1380.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that a public hearing on ordinance number 1380 now be held.
Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes. Floor is open for any public comment on ordinance number 1380.
Motion that public hearing on ordinance number 1380 now be closed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the public hearing on ordinance number 1380 now be closed.
Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Motion that ordinance number 1380 be passed in second and final reading and advertised according to law.
Second that.
It has been moved and seconded that ordinance number 1380 be passed on second and final reading and advertised according to law.
Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next, we have ordinance 1381, and it reads as follows. An ordinance amending and supplementing section 56A-2, definitions of chapter 56A, rental properties of the Code of the Borough of Wildwood Crest, defining persons licensed pursuant to the New Jersey Real Estate Brokers and Salesmen Act, NJSA 45:15-1 et seq.
Motion that ordinance number 1381 be passed on first reading, advertised according to law, be brought up for a second and final reading and public hearing on April 27th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m.
I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded that ordinance number 1381 be passed on first reading, advertised according to law, be brought up for second and final reading and public hearing on April 27th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m.
Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Okay, next we have the resolutions. The first is authorizing a shared services agreement between the Borough of Wildwood Crest and the County of Cape May Open Space and Farmland Preservation Program, public access beach improvements.
I'll motion that.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is authorizing award of portable toilets contract number 2022-01.
Motion.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is designating locations for a portable vending unit.
Motion that.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
The next two, if by consent agenda, are for Chapter 159s, authorizing amendment to the 2022 municipal budget to account for additional funding from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for the recycling tonnage grant, and the second is from the New Jersey Division of Highway Traffic Safety Mobilization Distracted Driving Grant.
I'll motion both.
Second both.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolutions be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is accepting work performed for the fiscal year 2019 Njdot Municipal Aid Program, reconstruction of Trenton Avenue from the beach to Pacific Avenue.
Motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
The next two by consent agenda are for release of escrow funds for permit number SO21-0104 in the amount of $582.50. And the second is SO21-0105 in the amount of $582.50.
Motion.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolutions be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is canceling erroneous sewer rents in the amount of $124 for property located at 103 East Stanton Road.
Motion?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is authorizing peddling truck license to A&T Ice LLC for 2022.
Motion?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is opposing NJDEP's proposed coastal regulations.
Motion?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
The next two are also for Chapter 159s. The first is authorizing amendment to the 2022 municipal budget to account for additional funding from the New Jersey Healthcare Quality Institute for the Mayor's Wellness Campaign Incentive Grant. And the second is additional funding from the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs for the Local Recreational Improvement Grant.
Motion?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolutions be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is authorizing advertisement of a notice to bidders for acquisition of 2 used model year 2011 or newer one-man refuse collection system vehicles.
Motion?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is authorizing grant application for Ocean Wind Pro NJ Grantor Trust.
Motion?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is authorizing approval of change order number 1, reconstruction of Beach Avenue, fiscal year 2020, Njdot municipal aid, and reconstruction of Stanton Road, fiscal year 2021, Njdot municipal aid, at the not-to-exceed sum of $112,285.
Motion?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is authorizing peddling truck license to Big Top Ice Cream LLC for 2022.
Motion?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is authorizing award of contract to Atlantic Wave Studio to provide technician to stream the April 27th, 2022 commission meeting at Crest Pier at the not-to-exceed sum of $1,200.
Motion?
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Lastly is authorizing Borough Engineer work order for Beach Street End Public Access Improvements Phase 1B, Construction Phase Services at the not-to-exceed sum of $41,000.
Motion?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Motion that all bills properly authorized and submitted be paid.
Second that?
It has been moved and seconded that all bills properly authorized as submitted be paid. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes. Okay, that brings us to correspondence.
Thank you, Trish.
Of course.
We received 2 emails, one with respect to handicap parking and meters. My understanding is that the public safety and the police department are reviewing that request as we speak. And we also received one with respect to the speed along Sunset Lake, the lakefront. And I believe, just to bring everybody up to speed, so the borough has received their requests over that over the years, and we've actually, the speed limit has been lowered along the lakefront from 25 to down to 20 there. There's, always looking for other ideas and for improvements, but I think we've addressed everything that we possibly can, at least at this point. But certainly I'll defer to Commissioner Schiff and Chief Lloyd if you guys have any other comments or suggestions or anything that we could do along those lines,
Yeah, I'd just like to remind the public that we do strictly enforce that 20 miles an hour speed limit on that portion of New Jersey Avenue. And we do have officers patrolling that area, and we also have directed patrols in that area looking for speeders. So.
I saw some the other day, actually. I immediately put on my brakes. Remind me. So, all right, first round of public comments. We'll start with anybody here in the room. Anybody have any public comments? Anybody on the conference line have any public comments? Mr. Kniff, do you have public comments?
No, sir.
All right, hearing no public comments, we're going to move on to first item of new business is proposed ordinance 1382, licenses permitting temporary signs. Solicitor Galzunas, correct me if I'm wrong. This is an ordinance that tightens up our existing ordinance that allows for if individuals or groups have I'll call it tourism-related events or races and so forth. It allows for the temporary placing so that the police department have a little more clarity on what to enforce and what not to enforce.
That's correct. The Borough Code currently allows for authorization by the Board of Commissioners for the placement of temporary signs. What this ordinance does is tie it in with the special event permitting process so that that consent doesn't have to be obtained separately by the special event person getting the permit, but as part of the permit process. In there, they'll put the proposed location, size, nature of signage. It can be reviewed by the special event coordinator, whoever responsible for that process, and then consent is automatically granted. So it streamlines the process and ties it in with the purpose of the special event itself. So it's reviewed by the same people and departments that are reviewing the special event permit.
Okay. Got anybody? Any questions, comments?
No, I think that will
Yes, sir.
clean it up pretty well, and this way we have a full understanding what's going on. So when we're getting a permit, that sign will be there, we'll see it, and we'll be able to take care of it at that point.
Be part of that permit process. You'll get to look at the signs at
That's
that point as part of looking at the special event in its entirety.
Very good, thanks for doing that.
All right, so that would be okay for introduction then, say at the April 27th meeting?
I'm fine. Yep.
Commissioner Schiff?
Yes.
All right,
Will do.
Madam Clerk? All right, moving on. Old business, Back Beach excavation, that's been tabled. Office movers, we're awaiting a report from the police department. New Jersey lots and so forth, that's also on hold. Proposed floodplain ordinance, April 2nd. So let's just talk about that. So we took our beating at the last meeting at the Crest Pier, like true gentlemen that we are. And I think we walked away, Mr. de Blasio, I'm gonna, and governing body and to the public, I'm gonna do my best to summarize what I think we heard. So with respect to raising, let's talk about the ordinance for a second. So the Bulkhead Ordinance that we originally were looking at, having folks go to, giving them 2 years, 2028 to 2030. If you're below the 6.7, we were asking you to get to the 8 by 2028. If you're already at 6.7 or higher, we're asking you to get to the 8 by 2030. Overwhelmingly, I think we heard the folks that were on the call and at the meeting say to us, hey, not opposed to it, but you need to push this down the road as far as you can, and we believe the borough has to do its due diligence in addressing some of the other infrastructure, some of the other items that are potentially leading to the flooding in the area. So, Mr. Blasio, I'm going to suggest these areas, right? So we had talked about pump stations, we had talked about outfall lines and removing or at least making the capacity larger so the water can get out faster, maybe eliminating or removing some of the siphon drain systems. To me, that's number one, or possibly number two. I'm not whichever way you look at it, because it's really if we're going to do one or the other. Pump station, do we need to do the outfall lines? I guess that's a question. I think that's what we heard. The raising of the streets was also brought up. I'm not sure if that's something that we want to entertain at this point. I think that causes some potential items as well, but I'll defer to you. And then the third thing is before we the borough raise its public street end bulkheads, perhaps we push that off because our public street ends tie directly into the private property street ends. So maybe that bulkhead project gets pushed off unless they're below the 6.7. Maybe something that we can address. So I think that was what I had heard. Commissioners, you by all means, please feel free, because I think what we need to do is start putting together a plan as to what we're going to do and address. I know we have grants that we're applying for, and we need to be really specific now as to what that plan's gonna be. So if everybody's on board with pushing that bulkhead ordinance requirement, say, down the road to say, I'll say between 2040 and 2050, I'll ask Mark and Solicitor Galzunas to maybe work on that part of it. But we do need to get a game plan leading up to that timeframe with clear timelines for people to understand what is the borough going to do about the flooding in the area.
So I would make a suggestion too on the bulkhead ordinance. It seems like the mandate is the controversial piece. Other components of that bulkhead ordinance are not as controversial in terms of putting a proper process in place, new standards, inspection process, and getting the new bulkheads up to eight, excuse me. So I would maybe suggest that if there's no opposition or issues with those aspects of it, maybe you get that into the ordinance while you deal with the mandate piece.
Okay.
The mandate can always be added
Correct.
later on, but we want to.
I think new bulkheads that are being constructed where people are saying, yes, I'm gonna put my bulkhead in, and I'm gonna make that expenditure. Let's get them up to the new height of 8. Let's get the new standards in place, and let's get a new process for inspection and administration in place.
That sounds fair enough.
That would be a recommendation.
So it'd be pushed down till 2040, 2050 as,
Well, under that scenario, Commissioner, what I'm suggesting is don't even
Don't even-
put that in while you deliberate on what's best for your community, and get the, what I would call the low-hanging fruit, easy layup stuff in the ordinance.
With the goal to amend later.
And then what you could do separately, as you deliberate over that, you might want to look at a more, a tier structure on the mandate, because the feedback that I heard was that it seemed like people were not opposed to going after or accepting that the bulkheads were really low. Not the people who have bulkheads that conform today, but like say elevation 4 and 5, who really are flooding the neighborhoods, that maybe they should be addressed on a tiered strategy, not so much to punish the bulkheads that are higher, but the ones that are really nuisance for the community. So that was what I heard it do that here.
Mark, what's your feelings about the outfall pipes? Because I know that we're having problems with them. I think a lot of the time, our flooding comes from the water coming up through the sewers, through the
Yeah,
outfalls,
So when we
flooding
made,
our streets.
so when we made the presentation on the master plan in 19, I think I reiterated this that Saturday. The borough's methodology should be to deal with the tide coming up through the streets first, and then once that is in process, then you deal with what I would call raising your perimeter, which would be bulkheading and somehow getting to Cressy Avenue, raising that as well. So sequentially, it should be restriction, elimination of tide, flooding your streets, and then raising your perimeters.
I agree with you. I think if we kind of look at what might be working, and that works, and we may not have to rush. I'm not really crazy about a pumping station at this point, but maybe that would alleviate the problem. You know,
So
knock out one thing at a time and take a look at it and see how it's
Right.
affecting our town.
So,
I agree.
so there were options that were in that master plan on how to deal with that. I guess the gold standard, the most expensive, what methodology to do that would be putting in public streets. Then you have different tiers below that. So I think that's a policy decision that needs to be adopted by the borough and then implemented.
Is there a way that your office could put together, I guess, a cost like, what's the cost to do the outfall lines only and maybe address?
That was in the master plan, and the FEMA grant applications that we submitted for the pump stations, which was December of this year, last year, we have those estimates as well.
Okay.
So it'd be easier to gather.
Would you mind circulating that to everybody in terms of, just to get fresh and make sure that, to make sure the number, I know costs and
Yeah,
supply
it's-
chains,
it's-
maybe everything's
it's-
going up. Maybe we need to just revisit the numbers and the plan, but I wouldn't mind getting that in front of everybody and.
The estimates that were in the 19 master plan were based on fiscal year 18, so the world changed a lot, so we'd have to revisit them, but structurally, it's all there.
Okay. All right, so what I'm hearing, Commissioner Franco, is Commissioner Schiff made a suggestion, we address the outfall lines first. And I guess there's different options, right? There's what we'll call manual, which would require Mr. Bond and team to manually open and close, right? And then there's the
So
electronic.
you have passive, which is your tide flex valves that you have now, which haven't shown a lot of great success. You could probably install them landward of the bulkhead. You have mechanical valves that you would close then you would have actuated valves that would close electronically, and then you could look at a pump station scenario. That's the far right-hand side.
So if we have all those different, I'll call them options, then we can have some conversations with PW and the governing body and come
I
up
think,
with
yeah, PW is a big player in that, because they're gonna have to maintain that, so their input is gonna be critical.
Okay. And I guess, so that would address, I guess, what I'll call that step one. And then whatever if we were to do that, that would not affect our ability, if we needed to down the road, do a pump station, right?
No, it wouldn't. We could try to design everything with a little bit of foresight, that if the mechanical valve situation wasn't panning out the way we wanted, we could be able to retrofit and move to a pump station scenario, but we would wanna plan that out properly.
So I guess, and then if we're going to go through the outfall, if our outfall lines, if we replace them or add new tie flex valves, what have you, if we need, obviously they go through the public street and the bulkhead, if we needed to replace or cap, would that be the appropriate time to do that if we had to? Or is
Probably.
it kind of slide it out and slide a new one in type thing?
Probably, because there might be, in that design, if we go to a pump station design, there might be scenarios where we're actually removing them.
Okay, so then we would need to address then the public street ends as well.
Correct.
So it sounds like we probably need a good detailed cost estimate,
Right.
maybe a phase plan, I would assume, like we wouldn't be able to do all of them in 1 year, I wouldn't think.
Unless
Probably
you
not.
get the grant that you applied for.
Yes.
And that's another decision point for you. Are you gonna undertake these improvements if you get a grant or not? Because we tried 1 year, we weren't successful. The second one is pending. So these are things that you just need to think about.
I have one last question for you, only because I'm down there on the beach. There's 5 outfall pipes out there, and I know that they're not extended out as far as really they should be to be operational. My question is when we're doing the beach project, I was told that they're probably going to be cleared, those pipes. So how much maintenance and how will that affect the flooding on our streets, the ones that are running towards the beach?
So, question for you, Commissioner, when we say the beach project, do you mean the back passing?
I'm talking about the dunes.
The dunes, Army Corps.
Yeah, I'm not
for
the other
instance, the Cape May Inlet project, they're gonna be borrowing sand from the high tide water line and using that to build the dunes. So they're gonna be clearing out our outfalls. That was part of why they are using our sand to build the dunes.
So that should help.
Yeah, I would think.
Right, to give you an update, I did speak to DEP yesterday. Wildwood and Lower Township have not signed their state aid agreements, and, negotiations don't seem to be progressing. So we don't really know when the dune will be built. We keep saying 2023, but it's really all predicated on the other towns and their participation. North Wildwood and ourselves have signed our state aid agreements, those 2 towns have not. So we're still in that holding pattern. Nothing's moving forward until those agreements are signed.
So within another 5 years after they do it, we'll have our sand back anyway.
Well, then they come back every 4 years
Yeah.
and take the sand away. Most towns get sand, ours will be removed, so it's the opposite of what people do, but it is a 50-year renourishment cycle.
Yeah, I just wanted to,
Thank you.
Mark, we've had conversations to Commissioner Schiff's question. We had talked about previously about extending those outfall lines, but my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is actually the capacity of the lines going to those outfall lines need to be increased. Just adding an extension here may not do the job in helping the drainage because of the
That is
capacity
correct.
issues.
And we do have a CAF permit to extend, so again, there were options in the master plan about whether to replace pipes and increase hydraulic capacity. We even talked about a pump station similar to what Wildwood's doing, that would eliminate some outfalls and pump it out. So again, that master plan was a 30,000 foot in the air review, which now is gonna require you to actually look at and make some policy decisions.
Okay.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we have a game, so just real quick on the floodplain ordinance, I think we have a game plan that's kind of in your,
Bulkhead ordinance.
the bulkhead
The
ordinance
bulkhead.
is in your,
Yeah.
yeah, you're
Was
right,
it flood?
I said,
So
yeah, your
I guess
bulkhead
just
ordinance.
to kind of bring that to a head, I guess, do we take that ordinance and modify it to remove the mandate and send it back to the borough for you to consider the ordinance, or do you still want to?
Yeah, well, how about we just, you make the recommendation based on what you heard at the meeting and what we're talking about today, and then we could have another discussion on it, keep it under here, so you can kind of walk us through it, make sure that we got our hands around it, and I think then shortly
So
thereafter.
what
we
we'll
can
do is we'll
introduce-
take the ordinance the way it was drafted and cut out the mandate portion and send it back.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind, so we have a list of all the people that attended the meeting, right, online and at the meeting, so I wouldn't mind just trying to figure out how we reach out to them and just kind of say, hey, here's where we are and here's where we're moving towards. I think the stakeholder meeting, I thought it was, although we got beat up pretty good, but I thought it was good and healthy overall. I do. We heard from the people directly.
I agree. I think it was very positive.
All right, so I'm just trying to figure out what would be the best,
Perhaps,
maybe we send them a letter?
Do one report, post it on our website, and then email that same report to the people that, were on that list. I think most of them supplied their email address.
Or- or-
If not, then we can mail.
Or we could at least send them,
one.
maybe we send them a notice, just a regular, just say, hey, we're gonna talk about it at a normal, regularly scheduled commission meeting, and then if they have any questions, they can call in or come to the meeting. And we can talk about it.
I think that's fair enough.
All right, good. All right, that's a game plan. All right, moving on, under old business, vision for old library and lease specs. Solicitor Galzunas, I believe we have, two draft, or soon-to-be drafts, lease specs for, the parcel we're referring to as the old library. I know that there's been some individuals contacting me as to what the status of these specs are. I indicated that we're still working through them in-house, but I guess whenever we have the final draft, let's circulate them around one more time. Just, there's a food and beverage aspect of it, and then there's a merchandise sale aspect of it. On the merchandise sales would be, if you looked at the exhibit, the diagrams, on the northwest corner, and then the food and beverage is on the easterly side, in the center of the building. And I believe that I think we should probably be ready to go if we're gonna go out to bid by, I would say, at the next meeting, because what I'm hearing from potential interested bidders is they need to make decisions on purchasing equipment to be ready for the building's opening at some time in the summer.
This is all predicated on the project being completed in a timely manner, so I think we need to get a little closer to see where we are with that before we pull the trigger.
Okay, so who's best to handle that? Like, who?
We can double check today with our architect and Mark's office to see how we look, but, and we also have a meeting coming up again, bi-weekly meetings with the contractor to check on progress and see what items they're still having issues with, due to supply chain demand right now. So doors, things like that, they were having issues with. They do have all their drywall now. We'll really have to check and see if we think that they will be complete on time.
Okay, and just to comment on some of the Facebook posts that we've been hearing about, with respect to the museum/Crest historical artifacts, so just to refresh everyone's memory, those items are being stored at the ambulance building. They need to be cleaned up. The street sign sales from last year were kind of earmarked or dedicated towards that preservation of those artifacts. Those artifacts would be displayed throughout the building, not necessarily in one room, because anything that's museum related, the idea would be to get people to walk around the rest of the building and not in just one particular location. And that one location that we're referring to would be better suited financially to the borough as a revenue source for merchandise. So just want to be clear about that, despite what you may hear on social media. If it's on Facebook, it doesn't mean it's necessarily true. All right, that said, that's my social media comment for the day. Moving on, Washington Avenue flooding issues. Jim Rutola is handling that grant, so we're still waiting on that. Flood mitigation and bulkhead ordinance, we've already talked about that. Referendum on one consumption license is on hold. Park Boulevard pumping station application, that's also on hold. So we have a couple different things related to flood mitigation. Can we just kind of bundle them all up
I
into
can.
one?
Yep.
And just call it flood mitigation projects? Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, that brings us to our last round of public comments. We'll start with anybody here in the room, and last round for public comments. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Hearing none, we'll go to anybody on the conference line have any public comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to commissioner comments before we move into closed session.
I have one. Today could be Rich Hans's 200th victory for Wildwood baseball. So if you want to come out and support the team, that would be great. I don't want to jinx them.
Congratulations, Rich, hopefully. Happy Easter, everybody. Hope everyone
Yes.
has a good spring break. So be safe. Thank you.
Okay, so just a reminder to everybody, so our next meeting will actually take place in the Wildwood Crest Recreation Pier, Crest Pier, on April 27th at 5:30. We have a couple of nice recognition to our girls' basketball teams, Catholic and Wildwood High, and also some volunteer awards. Pacific Avenue, those of you who have been questioning, what's the status of Pacific Avenue, so they are working on the concrete curbing on the east side of Pacific Avenue. If all goes as planned, we'll hopefully get the first coat of asphalt, so mill and pave will be done just before Memorial Day, and then after Memorial Day, they'll come back in, put the finish coat, and then also the line striping for the lane lines, but also the bike path lanes that the county intends to install. On that note, so I was asked by the county engineer when they stripe the bike lanes on Pacific Avenue, he suggested, which I think is a good idea, I wanted to make sure everybody's okay with, that we tie the county's bike lanes on Pacific Avenue to where Wildwood Crest bike lanes are on Seaview Avenue and Rambler. So Rambler is the connecting point, so it basically go Pacific Avenue and then veer towards the easterly side of the crest on Rambler Road and connect at Seaview Avenue and also the Rambler Road bike path, which is currently striped green. The county is not putting the green lanes in, they're gonna stick with the white lanes.
Good.
Everybody okay with that?
Yes, sir.
Okey dokey. Let's see. That's all I had for commissioner comments, and I would like to echo Commissioner Franco's Happy Easter, everybody. We're going to entertain a motion to go into closed session. We'll take a 3-minute recess, and then
Okay,
we'll...
let me just read
come
the
back in.
resolution, sir. Authorizing executive closed in accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act, specifically NJSA 10:4-12B, with regard to 3 items: the administrator contract directives, a potential contract negotiation, and potential professional services contract for an attorney for potential litigation for dredge project. Motion?
Motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes. Okay, so the big clock says 10:07. That one says 10:06. We're going to go with 10:11.